Hi everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Portcast podcast. I'm really excited to kick off this series with our guest Dani. This podcast is all about exploring the role of ocean and air visibility in an end-to-end supply chain. But we're also here to understand your journey, Dani, and the impact of technology in supply chain. Dani, you are Vice President, Head of Logistics at Assa Abloy. You're Dutch and based in the Netherlands. You've been working with this company for over 8 years. Can you please introduce Assa Abloy on yourself for the audience?
Let me start with introducing Assa Abloy first, before introducing myself. Assa Abloy is the world leading provider of access solutions. We want to provide everybody more safe access to the globe, basically, and that contains of doors, it becomes of passport control, it's containing locks, and so on and so forth, and everything in between. We grow quite fast. We grow organically, but also through acquisition. At this moment, we acquire one company every 2 weeks, which is kind of impressive. And also, if you link that to, of course, logistics supply chain, it tells you a little bit about the challenges that I encounter. Tell a little bit about myself. My background is in supply chain logistics. I always have been there. It's my professional passion. I'm 52 years of age, indeed, like already said, live and work out of the Netherlands, but work also internationally and globally. And my role in Assa Abloy is twofold. I manage the EMEA region, really logistically and supply chain technically day to day. But then also I lead a group of supply chain logistic experts for Assa Abloy Group, where we align on strategy, actions, but also partnerships, and so on and so forth. And of course, a big part of that is a transformation journey to ensure we leverage our skills and Assa Abloy matures in the world of logistics and supply chain.
And honestly, it's quite impressive. When you say that you have an acquisition every 2 weeks, I can easily imagine the challenges from both the technology and logistics point of view. I have a first question that I would like to ask. Why did you decide to work in logistics? Because it's not a typical job. And between you and I, it's not also a sexy job.
When I grew up in Rotterdam, you always saw the port because, of course, it's one of the biggest ports of the globe. So I was always interested in trucks, in ships, in warehouses. So I think that came from nature. I would like to go with my father to the port and just watch. He had a different occupation, but he worked out of the port area. So I always like to go with him and just watch. And out of that, I developed that interest, started reading into supply chain. And then, because it's a bit of a new area still, managing the total material flow end to end, really, I find still very intriguing also today. And I think during and after COVID, everybody on the globe finally understood what logistics and supply chain is all about.
I agree with you. I feel logistics is becoming sexier. Technology is making logistics sexier. For example, I can see here Portcast. That's a sexy platform. I like it. And then with all the recent events, especially the conflict, the trade war, people, they understand the impact of logistics.
Exactly. And then if you add, for example, like you say, the Red Sea, then suddenly it becomes very obvious how important logistics is actually, and also how important visibility is, because of course that's a linked subject.
Indeed, that's the topic. And you know, I think people, they start to understand supply chain when they go to the supermarket and they find products unavailable. Or they go to their store, Zara, H&M, and they see some missing item. So they understand that everything is not produced locally. Sometimes what they don't realize, it's the complexity. They can see made in China, made in Vietnam, but they don't see the entire chain of events, from the raw materials to the assembly to the distribution, storage, until the final delivery. Then, for the young generation, I think supply chain roles have become more attractive. It's not longer a worker in the warehouse. They understand that supply chain is about creating value for companies, and that's important.
Absolutely. And now, of course, if you sit behind the screen and you see the flow of your containers over the globe, and you can actually, like it is an app or it's your iPad, you can actually move it around. that obviously also intrigues interest of the younger generation, because then suddenly it is sexy.
But when you look at the B2B world, you can see that we are quite late in terms of innovation. For example, if I think about the B2C, I think about Amazon. And when you order something on Amazon, you can get access to the delivery information, you can see an ETA. When you order something on a food delivery app, you can even see the driver in the app. So it's quite advanced. How do you explain that?
I think it depends on where you look at. Because if you see certain industries like food, pharma, they actually started also years ago. Because I still remember when I started my logistical career and I was in food, we already had full integration with the warehouse. We already had EAN codes that were GS1 compliant, fully integrated to our suppliers, to our customers, doing things more with multiple customers delivering to one. So I think it really depends on which industry. The majority of the industries are a bit old-fashioned. I would agree to that. And also my own industry is an industry that is more classical. And yeah, the reason is I think it always starts with consumers. They gave the interest, they are faster, they are less burdened by corporate, they are less burdened by rules. And of course, Amazon is just a disruptor. They disrupt the whole logistics space by the way they do warehousing, by the way they do transport, by the way they do the customer promise. And I think that increased the speed tremendous. Because of course, you now get the generation working that is used to this. In the past, the generation was still used to working in a more traditional way, but now the generation that comes in says, hey, I've ordered something at a supplier. Why can't I see where it is? Why is it not there tomorrow? Why can't I choose if it's delivered in the evening? Yeah, then certainly that changes the ballgame.
And I think it comes from the consumer, as you say. They drive the innovation. And if we talk about supply chain and logistics, I think they also become a key part of company investment to generate revenue. If you look at Europe and the European market, all the companies, they struggle to grow through their product alone. On some markets, they are really saturated. So a good way to generate revenue, it's by reducing cost and creating some additional value. And that's where you will find supply chain and technology. Technology will be the link because technology is providing data analysis and correlation that will help you to take some action. Savings will come through the optimization. You optimize your production, you optimize your distribution, and then you can create some additional value for your customers through real-time tracking, customer portal, so they have access to that information.
And of course, our customer base starts behaving like a consumer, drives the change.
Exactly. They are driving the change. I'm also seeing a change in the way companies invest in logistics and supply chain technology. For example, if we take real-time visibility, they will less calculate an ROI to justify an investment because they don't have a choice. They have to do it. The market is changing, customer standard and requirements are changing too. So it's not just a good thing to have it. It's a necessity. It's a must-have. If they don't act now, it will be too late for them. And companies, they don't want to be left behind. So doing nothing is riskier than investing in technology.
Yeah, and especially in Europe, on top of that comes the circumstances we operate in, because we never had so many crises as fast as together as now. One is getting up with the other. So there are so many black swans swimming in the ocean that you have to become more agile and resilient and able to react on it, because only those companies that can will win, are the successors of the future. But also in Europe, we have scarcity of staff. And that will only increase because people are getting older. We will have more people on retirement and we will have less people being active. So you need technology to balance the available people capacity versus the demand, because otherwise there will be a mismatch and then there will be other problems.
It's getting depressing. Maybe one day robots will replace humans.
No,
No?
I think we can have a happy marriage with the robot. I'm actually quite convinced, because there are also jobs that are not interesting for a human being, but still need to be done. And I think the combination is really well. That means that you can think more, you can better plan the future, you can be more strategic if you want to. And at the end, not everything will be robotized. There will still be manual jobs available as well.
So you're not scared about AI? You don't think that AI will destroy the humanity?
I don't think so. I am more scared in the way we use AI, because of course we need to learn to work with it. I think that is more the challenge than AI itself.
Totally agree. People, they need to understand how to work with AI. And I think at the end, there will be a shift in job. People will work more and more with AI because it becomes integrated everywhere. I can see that at Portcast. We use it for predictive visibility, forecasting, invoice matching, document extraction. So the key is to recognize its value and use it in the right way, because AI itself is super powerful. It can match data together to create more insight, more value for the customer. You correlate different data points. I see that for predictive visibility. We provide the predicted ETA, but we also provide the reason why there is a delay. We also try to match some market risk. For example, there is a typhoon in China that will be the container impacted. So it's super powerful. You just need to understand how to use it. And then we can also set up alert, notification, and define with the customer what will be the next action. So I think that the key, you need to understand the value of AI, and you need to understand what you can do also with AI. What will be the use case?
Yeah, and that is important. You need to be critical about the amount of alerts. They need to add value because there is data overload. But you need to make from data information, and from information you need to make it actionable information, and actionable information that adds value. So if it doesn't really add value, you need to think twice. Why do I actually want to know this? If the ship is 2-3 days delay and you have an inventory buffer of 4 weeks, who cares? Yeah, maybe you don't even need that alert, because also I think at the moment that is what I also mean with we need to learn to deal with it. You need to see what really helps you in your day-to-day job, and actually what is just information that you don't need.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, if we talk about the information, there is first the information for the operation, so day-to-day job. There is then the data collected after the shipment arrived, so that's about performance analytics. Then there is all the forecast, so all the historical data that we can link to market trend to improve the planning. So in total, we have 3 pillars of data: operational, analytical, and forecasting. Then there is the question about how do you access to this data? Do you want to access to the data through a UI? Do you want to do it internally, so with an ERP? If we speak about that, Assa Abloy is a big company. So how do you manage your IT ecosystem? Is it something local? Is it something global?
It's hybrid. So some of the things are decided globally/regionally, I would say. Other things are really local, because our strength is being still the local partner. Knowing our customers, being able to satisfy their requirements is important to Assa Abloy. And also the world is different. A lock in Sweden is different than a lock in the Netherlands, because we have the handle above the lock, and in Sweden it's below the lock. So different rules, and that goes for the whole globe. So the local connection is critical for us to be successful. But of course, we also want to leverage our scale, because, like you said, we are big. But also to paint the picture how difficult it can be. If I talk EMEA only at this moment, and probably I'm already wrong, we have 37 different ERPs. And of course, we strive towards, one is maybe too much of an overstatement, but we strive to a minimal number of ERPs, but we will never get there. So what we try to do now is build a data lake in the middle. So we connect the ERP to the data lake, and we connect the critical tool set that everybody should use to the data lake, so that we get less dependent on the ERP, less dependent on creating a different integration to every ERP. We manage it a little bit different also to become more agile and resilient. So it's easier to roll out the solutions we, as the Center of Excellence on Logistics, develop for Assa Abloy as a total.
Do you think that is also something healthy for a company to work with different systems in place? So different ERP, TMS, tracking tool?
It of course depends on the size of your company, but I would say a critical element of supply chain is segment your supply chain. If you don't understand the different segments your supply chain is, you can't offer the best solution for the company and the customer, because a wholesale channel is different than professional channels or other type of channels. So you need to ensure that your supply chain is tweaked to what it serves. So yes, you do need different operating models. If I talk about Assa Abloy, and I do it really high level, we have two types of supply chain. One is as a configurator. So we basically buy components and semi-finished goods that are configured to an end product as close to the customer as possible. Then we have products that are produced in China or in other parts of Asia, shipped to Europe or the US and sold as a trading good. As an example, a safe, as a simple example. So that are two different types of supply chains. One is really where you can make the differences in the upstream part. The other part is more on the lead time of your configuration processes. So it are truly two different types of supply chain with two different demands of solutions. Because in the upstream part, I need logistic visibility. I need to know where the container is. I need to link it to weather data and stuff like that. So a bit AI-ish. The other part is a local supply chain. The suppliers are pretty close by. So you're talking about 1 to 2 days delivery time. Does it really matter how much visibility I have, as long as I know it's shipped and it arrives? So it are truly different type of supply chain with different solution requirements.
And how do you determine it?
I would say I determine it based on the specific supply chain. So one is a supply chain that really is a configuration supply chain and is really localized.
Yes.
The other is much more international and is much more about standards.
Totally agree, and I understand that, and I think it's kind of normal for big companies to have different systems that coexist, that work together, because the use case is different and they don't have the same requirement. And if we have to come back to the first topic, so real-time visibility on the data, that's a bit of the same. You need to go into details to understand the data set. So what is real-time visibility? 5 years ago and even right now, a lot of companies are claiming that they provide real-time visibility data, a lot of TMS, control tower, and even visibility tools, when in reality, they just provide the ocean carrier data and they don't add value on top of it, and they don't validate the data. Here at Portcast, when we talk about ocean tracking data, we are collecting data from the ocean carriers, but also from the port, from the terminal, from the vessel itself, so with the AIS position of the vessel, so that's satellite data. So we work with all of these data sets to validate the data, and that's what we offer in terms of data quality to our customer. And then there is also how the customer is going to use the data. So for example, for ocean tracking, we don't have to provide this tracking information to our customer every 5 minutes. There is no change. It's a vessel, is on the sea.
Yeah, exactly. Because even determine, do you really need real-time visibility, or is data that is, like, say, 6-7 hours old, is that still perfect enough for you? And if that's perfect enough for you to do your job, you don't need real-time data.
Totally agree. And that also will depend on the transport mode. Obviously, the requirements for air, ocean, and road are not the same.
On the other hand, what we have experienced talking about that, a specific part, we always looked, of course, like everybody else was doing, to the information you get from either your forwarder or your carrier. But that has always proved to be unreliable to a certain extent. Some are better than others, but at the end, it's unreliable. So you do need something that creates the visibility for you that is more trustworthy. Because, yeah, you can say, hey, I will just base myself on the information from the big forwarders that are out there. But there's one thing we know for sure, it's wrong.
Exactly. And that's why podcasts exist too, I would say. Dealing with data is a unique competence. It's not like everyone can do it or have the resources to do it. And then if we think about the ocean shipping industry, it's very old school.
Yeah, it is old school. And then they divide everything into, you have the pre-leg, you have the ocean leg, you have the last mile, and it's not linked. So you need to, and of course, for us as a company, what is important is when it's delivered to a warehouse or a factory. In principle, I don't care in which part of their process it is. I just need to know where it is.
Yeah, totally. And that's for the operational side of the journey. But once the shipment arrives at destination, there is also the billing process. And you will receive invoice in different formats. So it's hard to read, it's hard to extract the data. to correlate the information. Everything is super challenging. And even for one company, according to the entities, you will receive the invoice in different format. And you're like, what the fuck? I mean, I'm saying that because we have also a threat audit modules where we have OCR technology to extract the data of the invoice so we can reformat the data and make it bring more clarity to our customer. And then we can compare this data with the contract rate and the shipping journey. And when you look at that, really, you can feel the complexity. And they don't want to make it simple because also when you see the numbers of discrepancy of error in the invoice, I mean, that's crazy, believe me.
Of course, I cannot complain too much about this because we as Assa Abloy are exactly the same. But you're completely right. It is. The invoice is always different. We have a global agreement with those ocean carriers. Still, I need to check entity by entity if they stick to the agreement, because if I just trust the head office, I know I will overpay.
Are you optimistic that it's going to change?
I think it will not change fast, but it will actually change, because what you, for example, see, if I take Maersk as an example, they are actually changing their model, and they're changing it quite radically right now. So they will only ship to main ports, and then they will use what I call a feeder process, but then they own the feeders. And that will mean that the reliability of the ocean carriers that are now around 50 to 60%, so it's absolutely ridiculous. It's a ship that sails for weeks and we don't even know when it arrives. So it's completely ridiculous, but they will go probably to 80 to 90. And then suddenly all the others will follow, because of course they have to, because otherwise we will all go to Maersk. Because hey, if you know when your goods are there, it's much better for your inventory planning, and that's cash flow. So then we all want that same service. So it will change. I'm quite convinced that it will change because the technology gets available. I'm sure that there will companies stand up that will be disruptors in this industry as well. A few have tried and failed, but I'm sure there will come one that will actually be succeeded. And you have now a new party, a kid on the block that's also aggressive, DP World. That could be a disruptor of the industry.
Yeah, exactly. It takes a big player to make a move to disrupt the industry.
And of course, but now I'm thinking really out of the box and long term. Things will change because eventually we will start using technologies like 3D printing much more. So I think the shipping industry will change because things will be more produced on the continent long term, because we have to also because of the environmental impacts. So I do think that long term, the shipping industry will actually radically change. And if you look at the one of the big Spanish clothing brands, they actually tailor the material during the journey, because of course trends in clothing change that much that during the sailing time of the ship, they have actually people on board that can change the clothing to make it tailored to what is hip and happening at the moment. I am sure that type of things will more and more grow and the industry will change.
Yeah, we have to see if things change. What is sure is that we are living in a globalized and connected world. So we need more standardization. We need also new way of working. There is also the CO2 emission that will influence our decision, our action. So there are a lot of challenges. What is sure, it is now we have the data. When you open the Portcast platform, you can see your shipment, so you can take decision based on data. And also this type of platform offer a new way to communicate the information and offer more transparency.
The visibility solutions and the technology really helps, because now we have this visibility solution. My suppliers are entering the shipment on that visibility platform. My Asian sourcing office looks at the status in that same. So also because of the technology, we suddenly all speak the same language, because we look at the same data source, we look at the same even screen. So collaboration cross continent also becomes easier because of data, because of technology, and you don't need to share files with each other, do translations. Because at the end, that solution, if you want to have it operating in Mandarin, or I want to have it operating in English, that's a switch of a button.
Do you have a specific challenge in mind that this real-time tracking solution help you to solve every day?
So the first big one for me was after COVID. I guess you remember that we were having no more containers available, no places at ships, and container prices went up to $25,000 a container. But because we had that solution linked to our strategy, so we have what we call a 2+ strategy. So we work with two main freight forwarders and a direct ocean carrier. We were able to switch so fast, and we could switch. We don't needed our freight forwarder for that. We don't need to create an integration. We didn't need to train our suppliers because everybody was still on that same platform. So it was a simple switch, and that made for Assa Abloy, we didn't feel the pain of having no containers available, having no places at ships, or even going to 25,000 because of the strategy combined with the solution, with the technology. It was easy to manage is not true because it still was hard work, but it was manageable. And if that would have happened to us a year earlier, we couldn't have managed it because then what we needed to do is, okay, we needed to introduce an additional carrier. Oh, then we need to train our people in Asia that book the shipments. Oh, we need to train the suppliers to which carrier to use, or which ocean carrier, or which freight forwarder to use. It took so long, we were totally not agile and resilient that we could not have reacted fast enough to adapt to the new reality. So it definitely, the combination of having a clear strategy combined with a technological solution made us successful.
And do you manage air and ocean transport in the same way, or do you see some difference?
Now, air and ocean, to a certain extent, of course, is the same, but we need less events because it's much faster. So and for ocean, for us, it's more important that because air we choose if there is a problem in our supply chain, a supply chain disruptancy. That is mostly when we use air. If we can plan it, we mostly use ocean until certain examples. But because the way we do it is similar, but for air, we really say what is important. It's always urgent. So has it left? Is it en route? Does it arrive? But also the control. Is it approved? Has the cost been carefully considered? Do we really need to ship everything by air, or can we do part air, part ocean? Or can we actually do an air-ocean combination? Because also it has extreme impact, of course, on your sustainability footprint. I think with air, the difference is more that it helps us to make the right choice.
Yeah, on ocean is more straightforward at the end. A lot of companies, they ship from air to ocean because of the CO2 emission. There is also the cost. Air shipments are more expensive and have less space available. So that's the reason. In terms of tracking information, do you expect the same between air and ocean?
For air, it needs to be a bit more real time because, of course, there's less lead time. So if something changes in the lead time, and it's always critical, either you have a factory standing still, I have a customer waiting for a product that's making a new building or a new factory. So for air, it needs to be close to real time because we are waiting on it. And it's really important for your supply chain. So their track and trace is more of the essence. And then, of course, there are only a few events that make the difference. Are you on time to meet the departure of the plane? Will the plane arrive on time? Also because of weather and stuff like that, or congestion at an airport. And then, of course, it's the last mile from the airport. Does it go to custom clearance fast enough? Yeah. And then is it arriving at my warehouse or factory?
Yeah, because we had this debate at Portcast about air visibility. What type of information really matter? And the lead time of an air shipment is short. So do you really need, for example, telemetry data, seeing the aircraft position? I'm not so sure. It's a nice to have. So we have it. We have received this request. But for me, I think the most important are the milestone updates.
I 100% agree. You need the milestones more real time. You don't need to know where the airplane is because will it change your decision? Will it add value for your? No, it will not.
Yeah, exactly. It won't add value. I just guess it looks good on a portal or UI, It can also serve a proof of the data quality. It can be useful for CO2 reporting because you take the actual journey of the flight. But beside that,
I would never ask you that, because for my planners, it would not make a difference. They could not give better information to the customer. So the milestone update is critical. Where the plane is en route, I wouldn't care less.
But it can be different for ocean, where showing the position of the vessel and monitoring it can be interesting information, especially when it's close to the port. Then again, you don't need to update the information every 5-10 minutes. I mean, you need to update it every 4 hours, every 6 hours. That's enough.
Every 4 to 5 hours is probably indeed enough, because you have then the influence of the weather, but sometimes also a ship changes port strategy, then it does another port first. And that obviously does make an impact to your supply chain, because if it goes first to Rotterdam or Le Havre, that's 2 to 3 days difference.
Yeah, and I have a question. Once you have this tracking information, how do you process and store the data? Do you use the data warehouse to manage and analyze it in an efficient way?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we do. We are creating a data warehouse to link everything together and also be able to deploy the tools a bit faster, instead of having to build the integration again and again and again. And also, what we would also consider if we look at that, like, okay, it adds value, we want it, it makes a lot of sense for us, it's a good partnership, and then how easy is it to implement? Because of course, because of all the acquisitions, we have companies that are on the Gartner maturity curve, probably a 1, but we also have companies that are close to a 4 or a 5. And it needs to help all of them. And what I struggle also with internally is that a lot of people still think if you buy a solution out of the box, you install it and it's done. But that's not the way it works. You need to configure it for your own needs. If you buy it out of the box, it does nothing for you.
And you need also to understand how you're going to use the solution. For example, from our side, we provide 2 ways to access to the data. You can do it through the UI, and you can do it through the API. And the choice depends on the customer maturity, his IT resources, and the business case. If the goal is just to simplify the operation and see his shipment, the UI is super. It's straightforward. It's an easy solution. You can directly find the information. If the goal is just to integrate the data into another system, so to feed another system, can be a TMS, an ERP, a control tower, the API is the best option, and you go for it. But we need to understand that.
Yeah, exactly. But also sometimes I link the tool to a maturity curve, because if I talk about planning, we have a homegrown tool and we have a very sophisticated IBP type of solution. But to teach people of a low maturity what ABC, XYZ is, what a service level is, how to plan, I actually use the homegrown tool because it's simple to use, it contains all the language, and I can teach a planner which language to speak. Once that is done, you can move to the more mature levels if you need it.
Move to the next level. But that's a fair point. It also depends on the maturity level of the team. What is sure is the UI is ideal for the operational team because it's simple, it's straightforward. And then data integrated into the ERP can be used for future reporting. So there is no black and white. Even sometimes a customer can use both the UI and the API. So, everything exists.
There is no black and white, and it only becomes more complex, right, in the world. There's so much rules coming into play, trade restrictions, they change from day to night. What is the best sourcing strategy? Are you allowed to sail to the Panama Canal because of the height of the sea or the water level, better said? Then we have the Suez Canal, which we can't go through. There are so many things you need to take into consider. But at the end, it needs to fit in our brain and we need to understand it. So sometimes it gets too complicated.
And sometimes it's all about creating simplicity.
Yes. Yeah, because then we get reports and we think, oh, we like more. Oh, can we make another view? But then at the end, what do we do with that?
Yeah, and people, they even forget that they have asked for this report. But that's funny, because when I do a demo of Portcast and I show the UI, people always tell me that it's simple and they like it. because they can easily identify what's not working. So such as the delay shipment, they can see the exception, they can perform some smart search, they have some customized filter. And for these operational guys, simplicity matters. They just want to have a tool where they can easily do their job.
Yeah, exactly. And at the end, what do you really want to know is find those 2-3 containers that have a delay.
Indeed, and that's the new trend. It's all about exception management and risk management. You want to understand the exception, what's not working.
Absolutely. And there where I see the power of AI getting into play as well, because if you manage the exceptions, the things that really go wrong, because that is where you need to influence. And then even I think AI are still able to say, okay, but if I plan it a little bit differently, I take this route or I do something with it, still not a problem. And then we humans can really worry about the real complex stuff.
What do you think will be the future trends for real-time tracking?
I think we more and more will transition into what I call a more execution-centered approach. So yes, you have the visibility, that's the foundation, you have the data, but then the data becomes information, because then you suddenly know, okay, it will arrive tomorrow, but it's in line with the lead times that you have agreed upon and are in your planning plan. But then it needs to become actionable information. So then it becomes into an execution center where it actually, together with AI, say, okay, this container is delayed with a week. This will have the following impact on the following 3-4 customers' order. You can't deliver the customer in time. These are the 3 options. Please choose.
I agree for the execution. And we can even see that us internally, for example, we have designed some risk management dashboard where we assess different type of risks. So we take into account some live market feeds and the data we collect. So we have, for example, port congestion, port strike, weather events like a typhoon, and we show the impact on the containers. And then we evaluate with the customer what will be the trigger action. So what he has to do. Once we have defined the risk, the degree of the risk, the container impacted, what he should do. He should maybe inform his customer. So that's an example.
Yeah, and even then I would say, if you then link it to an end-to-end supply chain, if you still deliver into a warehouse that has 6 weeks of stock, and even because of the port strike, it's delayed with 3 weeks, you still don't have a problem. So at the end, a supply chain person that executes the problems, does he really need to know? Probably the answer is no. And I think their AI can just say, okay, yes, it is delayed, but I still have enough stock. Just push it through, let it go. It's even then, it's not an exception. The few that you need to manage are the ones that really delay the shipment to your customer or to a factory that falls still or whatever. So then if you then really look at it from an end-to-end supply chain perspective, then you really become efficient, because now you get this massive data in front of you and you need to find out yourself, okay, yeah, this is delayed. There are so many lines in this, but here I have enough stock. Hey, this line, shit, I have a problem.
I can see that in general, you have some good hope for the future. I mean, you're selling me a good vision of the future. One comment is just like we need to hope that people are going to change, because sometimes that's also the issue.
Yeah, and I think the port strike in the US was a perfect example, because part of the reason for them to strike is that they were afraid of the automation that was coming. And of course, if you go to the Port of Rotterdam, if a ship is unloaded by automatic container cranes, there's no human being. The container cranes automatically put the container on a truck. There's no human being in the truck because it's actually not allowed. So that whole process, the people that work there are more, they sit behind the screen with a joystick unloading a ship at miles distance. They are not even in the port.
To conclude, any positive word that you would like to share with the people, with the audience, so people listening to that podcast?
Yeah, I think let's all not be afraid of the technology. Let's embrace it. Let's use it. Let's use it wisely. Be critical, because also there's lots out there. There's lots of solutions. There's lots of data. But does it add value to your company, to your process? Does it help you in doing your job? Does it help your team? Stay critical. But on the other hand, embrace it. Trial and error. If you don't start, You will never do it. And I do think things like visibility, like your podcast, people should actually embrace it and use it because it helps them in their daily life as well. And also, I sometimes say, please reflect to your home situation. If you order something online, do you expect an email with a track and trace code? And do we expect that you know when it will be delivered and that you can actually choose delivery options? And 99 out of 100 people will answer you, yes, I do. So why don't we expect that same standard in the industry? And then they look at you like, yeah, that's actually strange.
Indeed. So guys, please listen to Dani. You have to act. There is always a way to do it. And if you don't do it, you will be left behind. Thanks again, Dani. That was the first episode, guys. I hope to come back soon with the second episode. For those who want to discover Portcast on our maritime, air data, and platform, please reach out to me, reach out to us on LinkedIn. You can also visit our website, portcast.io, or you can connect with me. So Maxime Reau. That was a pleasure, guys. Thanks a lot, and see you soon.